It's been practically the best of times for Oklahoma State football in recent years under Mike Gundy. Mark Rogers TV running down the best wins and the worst losses for that particular college football program. And we bring in Robert Whetsell talking about those Cowboys and Cowboys ride for free on the SB Nation platform. Hey, Robert.
Hey, thanks a lot, Mark. It's always a pleasure.
Yeah, so we dragged you through those losses and we brought back those heartbreaking moments. Now we're going to go on the positive side, and of course Oklahoma State football on an uptick, to say the least. Run down those victories that make you smile for whatever reason.
Oh, I thought about this quite a bit, and I sort of had my list made, and then on the way home tonight, got on the phone with my brother, happened to bring up that I was going to be doing this tonight with you, and we ended up talking about my list, and he persuaded me to change. He changed my mind on one of these, which I think is going to be kind of an interesting thing for some OSU fans to think about. There obviously, for me personally, there's some, there were some big wins when I was younger. I would have put 1976 Bedlam victory on this list had I been there. But unfortunately, the tickets that my dad purchased for he and I to go to the game were trumped by my sister's wedding in Georgia, which I'm still bitter about. So I ended up jumping back and forth on, for all those folks who are newer to football, this was back in the day where you had 3 or 4 channels. There really was no cable TV. And you had Keith Jackson calling, the ABC game, and they're scrolling probably about every 10 to 15 minutes. They would scroll really just some of the top scores at that time. And we were getting dressed for the wedding, and I had my shirt, my dress shirt on, and they'd managed to get the tie on me, and I was no pants. I'm in my underwear and socks. And I'm jumping back and forth between the beds in the hotel room, watching the TV. And I don't even remember who was playing that day, but we're watching the TV to see the next time the score would come up, and I wouldn't stop moving and to get dressed. I'm going to miss, the score. And how the joy we all felt in that hotel room, the University Inn in Atlanta, and the joy we felt when the final score finally flashed up there. That OSU had won the game. So I would have put that on the list if my sister hadn't gone and got remarried on the day of that game. Be that as it may.
What was she thinking? My goodness.
I don't know. That really, I wonder sometimes about what my dad's true priorities are, or were. So anyway, number three on the list. And again, these are going to be pretty recent. I didn't include 2001, 2002. I'm sure the argument could be made for the Bedlam wins in those 2 seasons. I stuck with kind of the more recent history because of what was at stake at the time the game was being played. What was going on around the team during that season. And so number 3 on the list comes 2011 was the game on the road at Texas A&M. It was the first real big game that season for Oklahoma State, who started so well, and Texas A&M had a good team. And now I'm drawing the quarterback.
Ryan Tannehill.
Ryan Tannehill, thank you. And they just got flattened in the first half. It was 20-3, and I can't tell you how many times I've rewatched that third quarter. That was just one of the most ridiculous third quarters, shows ever put on. And in the way the tension in the fourth quarter, Justin Blackman running backwards into the end zone for a safety to run out the clock. OSU people, you have to understand, we were waiting for him to trip and fall at the 5-yard line, to do something and the ball comes squirting out, some crazy nonsense, the guy snap it over his head. We were just waiting for something like that to happen, and it didn't, and they won the game. And that was a huge, huge win at that point. Really, for me, that was a win that really started that downhill run towards the end of the season. A loss, that could have ended up being, we talked briefly beforehand, that a loss in that game really could have turned it into another 2010 season, which wasn't awful, but they really had so much, the expectations were so much higher with that team after 2010 and Whedon's performance. So that was just, I think that was a win that defined that season. That really tilted that season in the direction that it ended up going. Number 2 on that list was obviously the Fiesta Bowl win. My brother talked about that win and the Bedlam game, which he and I actually was at Bedlam 2011. It's the only time I've ever witnessed in person Oklahoma State beating OU. And I told my brother, I said, I'm flying home. If I buy the tickets, will you go to the game with me? And he said yes. And we had a fantastic time. And then he got to go to the Fiesta Bowl. And he talks a lot. He's mentioned it many times how special it was to go see what he would consider, a lot of people would consider 2 of the greatest wins in program history. But that Fiesta Bowl was just incredible. I've watched that I don't know how many times. And Justin Blackman's performance was just incredible. The way it ended with that poor freshman kicker, Williamson, just duck hooking, wickedly duck hooking that what was not a very long field goal at the end of regulation that could have won. And then missing again on the first possession in overtime. Just the way that ended. The only thing that was a little disappointing is I wish it would have ended with the score on the pass play to Shelf, Colton Shelf. I wish that would have been the play that ended it. It ended up almost being anticlimactic because you've got the review and it kind of sucked the air a little bit out of that last second part. But still, for Oklahoma State, their first BCS game, playing against a recognized, good, solid, big-time program in Stanford, and the way they played, the way they came back a couple of times in the game, that was by far and away the second most important victory for me for Oklahoma State. This one's going to throw people off. Number 1, a lot of people will be going to Bedlam of 2011. First conference championship outright in the history of the program, storming the field, Lewis Field, tearing the goalpost, down. But I'm taking that off the list. And one of the reasons I'm taking it off the list is Oklahoma State was a big favorite in that game. They were most definitely the better team. And I know a lot of OU folks, especially my good buddy that I've spoken of in the previous post video, he fully expected Oklahoma to get thrashed in that game. So I'm going to go back to 2009 to a little Thursday night game that introduced us in a very inadvertent way to both Brandon Whedon and Justin Blackman. Everybody remembers the story about Whedon. He's a third stringer. They tried to run him off the team. He wasn't a hard practicer. He admitted it. Said, "You're a third stringer. Why am I going to go out there and kill myself?" He's the ex-pro baseball player. Blackman was still a very unknown commodity, playing in the shadows of Des Bryant, who got suspended obviously earlier that season. And if Alex Cate, the second-string quarterback, had completed even 5 or 6 passes that first half, we likely might have never seen Brandon Whedon as the starting quarterback. But in comes Alex Cate, famously, not a single completion to his own team. He managed to complete 2 balls to the University of Colorado, who did not have a good team. They were not very good. And Whedon comes out. Gundy's pretty much forced to make a switch at halftime. And Whedon comes out and trots out there to that huddle. And I was telling you earlier, I can't remember the exact quote, but this is pretty close, where he walks into the huddle, and only a guy that age, with that experience, is going to do that. walks into this huddle with all the starters and says, "Boys, if you protect me, we're going to win this game." And then proceeds to have the halftime of a life. And of course, there's tremendous foreshadowing here as he throws the winning touchdown, was that rollout 40-yard dart to Justin Blackmon. And there you have it for the next 2 years. That was those two guys were just linked like no other in the history of the program. So that's why and my brother, we can blame my brother for this. That's why I picked that game. Because that really was, if Brandon Weeden doesn't play in that game, you might not see him. You definitely don't see him in the first half of 2010 probably, unless Kate just goes in the tank. But really, seriously, if that doesn't happen, that half cemented him as the starter the next season when Holgerson showed up and Kate transferred, and that the rest was history.
Yeah, I'm sure Oklahoma State fans appreciate Brandon Weeden, arguably the greatest quarterback in the history of the program. Unfortunately, I think this happens a lot. We could go through a number, dozens and dozens, if not hundreds of star collegiates who then went to the NFL and disappointed, and the perception then is that the person didn't live up to expectations and their college careers marred. And I just always hate to hear that with particular players, and I think that's happened to Brandon Weeden in particular, and I think we need to separate the NFL performance versus which is there's still an opportunity for him to, of course, right the career, and he wasn't given the best opportunity in Cleveland with subpar talent around him, but I digress. Brandon Weeden was arguably a great college quarterback who had an exceptional run at Oklahoma State and could really wing it down the field, and again was at the controls for some of the biggest wins in program history. The one that stands out amongst those three, you would have to say, Robert, probably more people watched Oklahoma State play football that one night in Arizona against Stanford than at any time in history, just assuming I work a little bit in television and know about television ratings, that those BCS games, the way they rate, probably more people watched Oklahoma State football that night than any single game in history.
Yeah, no, that, and to boot, it was a great football game. I mean, Oklahoma State won. If Oklahoma State lost, it was still one of the best BCS games ever. It was a good game. It was well played. You had stars making plays. They were well coached, and it was two really good football teams, and using their talents. Stanford did exactly what they wanted to do. They played a lot of power football, a lot of pro style offense, a lot of play action, and controlled the clock. And Oklahoma State, famously, quick strike, move it down the field fast, slinging it all over the place, trying to get on a roll and get the defense on their heels. And both teams at different times in the game, had their way. And really the only real, what you would call really awful thing to see in that game were the missed field goals, by the kid from the freshman from Stanford. If you look back at that game, that's really the only thing you look at and go, wow, that was awful. How terrible was that? I mean, it was such a well-played game. I think it was a great time for Oklahoma State, and they're, now we spoke about this offline, and I think this is a good place to point this out, that as fans for Oklahoma State, and we've written about this at Cowboys Ride for Free, and it's been written about other places. Are Oklahoma State fans ready for the kind of attention and pressure that comes with being a top program? You spoke about the losses and how, when you're a good program and your season is defined by 1 or 2 losses, that just right there, that means those losses carry more weight. If you're 4-7, you know, 5-6, 6-5, whatever it is, you know, really is the loss, you know, does the loss carry that much weight in the scheme of things? But where you're a team vying for a title, those losses really, you know, carry a lot more pressure, a lot more attention, you're absolutely right. It's, you know, it's why Bedlam 2013, you know, ranks up there for me. It's you know, that's a couple of losses in a season, and one of them cost you a championship. So those are, you know, that definitely is, as OSU fans, it's great that we've had recent success the program's never seen. At the same time, it kind of stinks because now the losses are going to hurt. You know, there's just that much more tension around the big games because there's something on the line other than just whether you win or lose the game.
That's right. Just ask John Cooper in the mid-'90s. His team lost 3 games in 3 seasons, 3 regular season games, all to Michigan, cost them a chance to play for the national championship, and he finally lost his job after going a dismal 8-3. He lost his job at Ohio State. So yeah, when the expectations get to that point, yeah, 1 or 2 losses are devastating, and Oklahoma State, with this kind of success, is getting there, possibly. So Robert Whetsell joins us from SB Nation's Cowboys Ride for Free. Robert, we appreciate the conversation. We love it. We love looking back at these old games and stirring up some discussion here, and we invite some people to join in and obviously offer their best and worst from the Oklahoma State football history in regards to what really hit them hard on a high or on a low. So Robert, we appreciate the time.
No, thanks again. It's a great time to come on and you know, get to talk OSU football. It's a great distraction from the other regular stuff during the day.
No doubt about that. So again, bring in your comments. We'd love to hear from you as well on Oklahoma State football.